Hello, and welcome back to the Masonic Roundtable, a weekly program where Masons from around the world get together to talk about Masonic news and opinions in a friendly and social manner. Standard disclaimer applies. The thoughts and opinions expressed here are solely the opinions of the participants and do not represent any Grand Lodge statements or positions. Make sure you keep your conversations open for the public and on the level. To interact with us, you can send questions and comments to our Twitter page at Mason Roundtable or on the Facebook event page for episode 227, Laboring in the Quarries, or follow along at home in your trusty YouTube chat or app by coming to this video live as we record this Tuesday nights at 10/9 Central. So, as for introductions, my name is John Ruark. I'm a past master of the Patriot Lodge, number 1957, in Fairfax, Virginia. And we have a small crowd tonight, starting with Robert Johnson. Robert, say hi. I know, he snuck back in.
Hi, Robert Johnson, Waukegan Lodge number 78, Waukegan, Illinois, past master, current sitting secretary. Thanks, John.
Smooth as butter. And last but not least tonight, Juan Sepulveda.
Hello, everybody. Juan Sepulveda here from Orange Blossom Lodge number 80 in Kissimmee, Florida, and the host of the Winding Stairs Freemasonry podcast. Good evening, brothers.
Good evening. Good evening. So, in Masonic news, we just have a quick update. Last week, we talked about the expulsion of it's not an expulsion of all Templars, but it was a removal of recognition, as we like to call it in the Masonic community, of the Grand Encampment of the Knights Templars from the Grand Lodge of Louisiana. Why did they do that? Because one of their expelled brethren from Louisiana was still seen conversing and going about with the Grand Encampment of the Knights Templar, because just last week was the annual convention of Knights Templars. So just a small update this week where the immediate most excellent past, what do you call this? GM. It's not Grandmaster, but similar title of the Grand Encampment of the Knights Templars responds to the Louisiana Edict. So basically, they sent some information over to a couple other folks, including Chris Hodap, which basically says, yeah, we know he's suspended or expelled. However, we have some paperwork that we need to do on our side. And so while things remain in force, we really have to basically do the due process. So I can see both sides in that case, where sometimes things go a little slower than we want to in Masonry. If you ever try to deal, talking across jurisdictions, for example, the pace in which information travels, even with the information age, can sometimes not be as efficient as we like. So there's a slight update. If you want to read all the gory details, head on over to freemasonsfordummies.blogspot.com and check out the update from Chris Hodap. So this week, we are taking a break from the mounds of history that we've had over the past 5 weeks, talking about the history of our respective Grand Lodges, which I've thoroughly enjoyed and had good feedback from. But now we're going to take a little spin back to a little bit of introspective and philosophical underpinnings of the fraternity, specifically talking about laboring in the quarries. We see the term labor show up in Masonic ritual, and it comes in a variety of forms. So tonight we're going to talk about the different aspects of the term labor and how it's used. So one thing that I wanted to hit on first was, let's see, I have an example here of what Mackey has said. So I think if you look at Mackey's Encyclopedia of Freemasonry, it goes into a little bit of what he defines as labor. And I want you to listen closely to see if you actually get a solid definition out of his paragraphs of information, but it's worth going over here. So what Mackey says about labor is that it is one of the most beautiful features of the Masonic institution that teaches not only the necessity, but the nobility of labor. From the time of opening to that of closing, a lodge is said to be at labor. This is but one of the numerous instances in which the terms operative masonry are symbolically applied to speculative. For, as the operative masons were engaged in the building of material edifices, So, free and accepted Masons are supposed to be employed in the erection of a superstructure of virtue and morality upon the foundation of the Masonic principles which they were taught at their admission into the order. Now, when the lodge is engaged in reading petitions or hearing reports, debating financial matters, etc., it is said to be occupied in business. But when it is engaged in the form and ceremony of initiation into any of the degrees, it is said to be at work. Therefore, initiation is Masonic labor. This phraseology at once suggests the connection of our speculative system with an operative art that preceded it, and upon which it has been founded. Labor is an important word in Freemasonry. Indeed, we might say the most important. For this and this alone does a man become a Freemason. Then he goes on to say every other object is secondary or incidental. Labor is the costume design of every lodge meeting. But do such meetings always furnish evidence of industry? For example, the labor of an operative Mason will be visible, and he will receive his reward for it, even though the building he has constructed may in the next hour be overthrown by a tempest. He knows that what he has done is his labor, and so must the Freemason labor. His labor must be visible to himself and to his brethren, or at least it must conduce to his own internal satisfaction. So, as we build neither a visible Solomonic temple or an Egyptian pyramid, our industry must become visible in the works that are imperishable, so that when we vanish from the eyes of mortals, it may be said that our labor is well done. As Freemasons, we labor in our lodge to make ourselves a perfect building without blemish, working hopefully for that consummation when the house of our earthly tabernacle shall be finished, when the lost word of divine truth shall at last be discovered, and when we shall be found by our own efforts at perfection to have done God's service. Very beautiful way of talking about Masonic labor. My observation, having read through all of that, he still didn't define what it actually is. Only once did he say initiation is Masonic labor.
Yeah. And it's interesting that he puts such an emphasis on the visible, because if you were to think of operative Masons, for example, you would have people hewing stone, hewing stone in the quarry, and you would have um, people working sharpening tools, and you would have people working on design, and you have people working on a lot of different things that are not necessarily visible. They do contribute to the visible component, uh, but more on the invisible later. Uh, but I just think it's broader than that. But uh, it does have to be contributing towards the building. So in a speculative component, every every effort that moves us forward, that moves the building forward, I think should be or could be considered labor.
I think one of the interesting things that we're seeing a lot in those passages that you read, it is literally the same problem that I find with most, I'm going to use air quotes and say esoteric writings. Not that I don't, I mean, I love that side of Freemasonry. That's why I'm in it. But my main problem is that you see that kind of writing when you have somebody who is so stupefied by or so in awe of the grandeur of the subject, and they're seen as an expert in that realm by people who are also in awe of that subject. And then you have somebody who's been put on a pedestal who people look to and will idolize that person, even though when put on the spot, they maintain this level of cryptic answering of questions in the hopes that you never realize that they don't know what they're talking about or that they can't answer the question, because by simply saying we can't define something, you're somehow they're pulling away from their own validity. And when that happens, dollars go away. And so we see that a lot with authors today, specifically with a lot of modern day esoteric writers. if these guys wanted to be serious about conveying the truth of something like this, then you would write something and keep it in the fashion of the way the Gutenberg press changed the world, right? It made information available to the public. So a modern day interpretation of something like that would be to have said something like Masonic labor is the degrees, the initiation, it's the internal work, right? Like the entire thing is essentially the idea of the temple is an allegory for man. The tools are your things that you use to control your mind and your vices and become better. And that's the labor, right? Like meditations is the labor. Working with your fellow coworkers to better understand each other, or discussing ideas of justice or whatever, that's labor. And I think what's interesting is you can't just say that. Like Mackey and some of these other guys don't say that. And I don't know if that's because, Mackey has that idea, and so does Pike talks about casting pearls before swine, but it's a basic idea. Like there shouldn't be anything really cryptic about it. And as a side note to the listeners and the watchers of the program this evening, when you see or when you hear or when you read a Masonic author who talks that way, challenge them to break it down.
Yeah, I mean, well said. Because as I was doing research for this show as well, I was looking through some old archives and being able to search them digitally, and looking at both Masonic encyclopedias as well as even Morals and Dogma, just for kicks. Both Pike, Mackey, and Coyle, all of them, they are inconsistent when which they use the term labor, because they can mean it as far as the initiatic ritual process. They can mean working on your relationship with your creator. They can mean applying those principles you've learned in lodge. They mean operative, actual labor of building things. Just and every combination thereof. And so they'll use the term labor not even as a pejorative, but just basically just kind of a filler word sometimes, um, to kind of carry the conversation forward. So that's why it really intrigued me, as well, if there's no clear cut example, then what does it mean for each of us, right? Which is what we're going to talk about tonight. So Juan, I know you have some thoughts.
There we go. I started talking with my mute button on. I found another passage from Mackey that I really like. He says, "We hear constantly of Freemasonry as an institution that inculcates morality, that fosters the social feelings, that teaches brotherly love, and all this is well because it is true. But we must never forget its foundation stone to it, that from its foundation stone to its pinnacle, all over its vast temple, it's inscribed in symbols of living light, the great truth that labor is worship." And I really love that expression. And I have this highlighted here from, God, this must be like from 2010, because I love that perspective in which you basically show your gratitude to the creator by being active, by being by moving forward, by not being idle. And it's so beautiful when you read it like that, but thinking about it from a practical point of view, from an applied point of view, what are we doing as individuals to put that worship to practice? Like, are we actually moving forward and taking an assessment of where we are and where we want to be, and trying to implement the lessons of Masonry to help us achieve, or attain those goals?
I'm glad you brought that up, because there was one piece that I was struggling with for a while. I think it came out of one of the Scottish Rite degrees, where they allude to the fact that labor is worship, and therefore, um, work for work's sake, even if there's no reward, is virtuous, is worthy.
Mm.
And being a lean expert where you're not seeing value come out the other end, even they're like, wait a minute, you're supposed to be accomplishing some goal. And so work for work's sake is waste if you're like talking lean production, right?
Yeah.
And now, of course, philosophically, you can't apply lean principles, or maybe you can. That's another book. But really, it comes down to um, is work is just the actual process of you're going in doing your usual vocation
Hmm.
and doing it well and doing it without complaining and doing it without expecting of a bonus or a reward. Is that part of the great Masonic endeavor? It's challenging for me because me personally, I want to see an attainment toward a goal, right? I want to see, and it's not for selfish reasons. Okay, it could be, but it's like, why am I doing this job?
Yeah.
What
It-
One way to think of it too is one day I listened to some motivational something or other on the internet, and they said one thing that they've done to change people's minds is they ask, um, why do you go to work? And people will usually say, well, I got to feed the kids, pay bills, and that kind of stuff. And like, no, no, no. Why do you go to that specific job? Because if money is all you need, why do you go to this place of employment? Why do you do this vocation? Right? What is the means to an end that you're trying to get to? And it really kind of made me pause when you think about, like, wow, like, why am I here? Is it just circumstance, or is there some sort of other purpose I'm trying to get out of? It's a tough conversation.
I'm with you with the whole lean mentality. Uh, but if you think about the proper implementation of lessons learned through masonry, if you were to apply them to your work, if you apply them to your personal, relationships and all that, you would have several steps. For example, uh, being able to lay down your plans on a trustable before upon a trustable before you actually begin to work would represent that prioritization of what's really meaningful work and what isn't. So if you are being efficient in that regards, where you're actually making plans and then acting upon them, then you wouldn't find yourself just doing work for work's sake. You would always find yourself reassessing, okay, where am I in in this continuum of work, and what is the next actionable item that I need to tackle. That's easier said than done, of
Get behind
course.
that.
Yeah, that's why you need a little scrum stand up in the beginning of the day.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I think about labor and I think about applying that in our everyday circumstance, without taking up the rest of this episode with a long tangent that I could go on here, it seems as though each of us takes a piece of whatever really drives us, right? In our vocations, our regular day jobs. And that is essentially a part of what makes you feel good and fulfilled. So for somebody like me, I'm very much a task oriented person. I see something, I want to get it done, I do it, I dream about it, I put it out there, and I finish it, and I move on. Right? We could geek out about Briggs Myers all day. I'm ENTJ. I'm a commander, and so that's what I do, and that's what I love to do. Um, for me, though, I read a book. It was a, biography by Gene Simmons a long time ago, and in the book, he said that every day, he starts off. This is more of a business side in this book that he was writing. Every day, he starts off with a to-do list, and if he finishes everything on the list, there wasn't enough on it. And when I think about that, like this constant drive to do more, do better, and to produce, I look at kind of the inherent nature that I see in people, this need to produce, this need to come up with something new, to create something, and this is a human drive that we have, and that's some of the labor, right? So in a way, uh, the need to produce, or whatever, however you want to take a path to get to that, is in itself a divine labor in a way. And we will think about things like the idea of apotheosis, or the idea that Gnostics had, right? That we would return to the play Roma as long as we would learn the Gnostic secrets, or the secrets that are contained within life, that will allow us to escape and shed our mortal coil, and then like meet, and not meet God, not be with God, but be one with, right? The original idea of hell is not a place that Dante invented, but a eternity, not with God, right? So removed from everything that you're familiar with, or removed from the divine attributes that you are. So we look at labor in that way. And if you want to look at it, and you can look at, well, how do I really look at what I'm doing here in the real world, the physical here and now, going to work every day, as a data analyst or a project manager or whatever I'm doing that day. If I'm satisfying my fulfillment and what makes me happy and what drives me to do my stuff, that is the divine work. That is the divine labor, because in every person, George Plumer writes about this, Wilmshurst writes about this, and of course, it's in every religion, not just major ones, but the divine spark is within man, right? So by fulfilling yourself, by fulfilling the good work that makes you happy and that makes the world better, you're you're doing the divine labor. And so if that helps somebody think about that every day, you get up and you say, "Why do I have to go do this crap job?" Well, there's some element of that job that I'm sure you like, whether it's the people or the job itself, and you don't like the people, or maybe you got the dream job where everything's butter, right? Or I shouldn't butter, everything's gravy, everything's great, um, and then everything's good, right? But John, you asked that question, like, why do you get up and you go to work that day? And then you said, well, if it's just the money thing, but what gets you there? What does that? And I immediately think, well, obviously, it's just the money. Like, that's what I need. That's what I need to play the game, right? Because humans really, are we really meant to just get up and live in a cubicle? There's that whole argument too. So dive a little bit deeper as you suggest, and it's kind of like, well, it offers me something. It offers me a way to do what I do, to do the an out and a way to say I'm a project manager. It allows me to do that every day and then make things happen, and I feel fulfilled that way.
I love it. I'm kind of on that same wavelength. So now the question I'll ask you guys, haven't had some time to think about it, is then what is your definition of Masonic labor? What does Masonic labor mean to you? And we'll start with Juan, because I know I think he and I are probably on the same wavelength there of what does it mean to apply Masonic labor in our daily life. Go ahead, Juan.
Yeah, for me, Masonic labor is that process of recognizing that you are an imperfect ashlar, and make that continuous assessment of what makes you so, and what steps are necessary in order for you to perfect yourself or move towards perfection. Um, like I always say, we we never reach perfection. We always ideally are striving to move towards perfection. So that requires all these returns back um, to the command center, and having some periodic moments in which you take a look at yourself and see, okay, where did you start, where are you now, have you made any progress, have you uh, messed up in some areas, do you need to repair something that you used to do well. So in simple terms, is that process of recognizing your imperfections and moving towards perfection. That to me is Masonic labor. And what I've always been interested in is being clear with it, not just saying it and trying to sound philosophical in the process, but like, how do I actually get better at it? And I have a lot of room for improvement, and I know the areas in which I need that. So it's up to me to take ownership of those faults and come up with the plan myself. And what I would recommend to the brothers listening, if if this definition resonates with you, do not wait for your lodge to put together the education program that you so desire. Do not wait to come across, someone who is going to grab you by the hand and try to make you a better man. This is your journey. Like, this is your responsibility as a man, as a Mason, to improve yourself in Masonry. Uh, Sometimes I try to tell people, it's like, you your focus in self improvement is not vain or self centered. It has a purpose that goes beyond you. Like, there is little efficiency in helping other people when you yourself haven't taken the steps necessary to become better. So as we progress in life and we become free, we attain financial freedom, or we attain mental peace, and we have a relationship balance, then we are in a position to help other people who perhaps are in a less fortunate situation. So, this focus on the individual is not necessarily self-centered. It has a bigger purpose. It radiates from that point outwards. So, like, that's how I see the whole dynamic of Masonic labor. And that's why you see me talking so much about the application of Masonry. Applied Freemasonry is my mission.
Yeah, let me build on that, because that's, again, of same vein, Juan. If we start with the premise that Mackie did a horrible job of trying to get across, which was the application of Masonic principles, right? Applying those principles that were taught in Lodge, right? Then to me, that means the application of the virtues, the application of some of the lessons that were taught, specifically of how to work and deal with other people, and to work and deal with our Creator. So, being in the lean agile community, one thing that's very popular in that community is the concept of Kaizen. I think I may have talked about it before, but Kaizen really just means incremental improvement, or as the brother who writes the Art of Manliness blog put it, be 1% better every day. And I love that, because it's simple, it's catchy, and it's attainable, right? That the goal is not to, do a cold turkey, switch to a brand new diet, because those never work, right? But we can be 1% better every day. And if you just do that every single day, you chip away at the stone instead of trying to just cleave it off. And so, using that concept of being 1% better every day, that's to me how I try to apply laboring in the quarries that way, because my recent effort has been to, if there's been a friend that pops up in my mind for whatever reason, and I haven't talked to them in a while, I'll instantly text them, message them, or if it's appropriate, I'll call them just to say, hey, just thinking about you. Hope everything's well, right? Just to keep those friendships going, right, and not be, at least not be the contributor to why our relationships may fall apart, because we're supposed to be here to serve other people. There's a reason I was thinking about them, so it's one of those things I try to do recently. As far as working on my relationship with my Creator, I do daily devotions. I do research. I mean, I'm just, Juan and I were talking in the green room about some of these books we're reading that are about biblical historical analysis, and it's just really fascinating to continue to work on improving yourself by really analyzing what my faith structure is and how can I apply that in my daily life. Um, and another thing I'm working on as far as applying this concept of labor is um, reaching out and joining these communities, like Juan started the Gentleman's Brotherhood, or the Order of Man, or the Art of Manliness, or any of these other self-help slash you know gentlemanly kind of groups, just to get different perspective, to see how do we deal with as a community with the daily struggle of trying to attain some sort of image or perfection, while we have to deal with the crap that sometimes the world puts on us. And so, to me, that's really what a lot of laboring, Masonic labor is applying those things we've learned into the year 2018, and how we make that relevant today, and really try to be a better person. So that way, as Mackie was alluding to, that even though you may not have a visible building that you've built, people can say, "Ah, I know him. He's a good guy," because he's you can just tell because he's always on the up and up. He's always saying the right things. He's always keeping his language clean. Those types of things. So I had a little humble brag moment back in 2007. Um, I had someone come up to me that I was only loosely friends with, but they basically said, I think of you as a good Christian man. And it was really strange because I never really talked about my faith openly in the forums where I was hanging out with this friend of a friend. But then I was very humbled by that and said, "Well, thank you," and all that. But it really gave me pause because, well, how did they associate that with me? Was there something that I was doing right that gave them that impression? Because otherwise, the opposite would have been worse if they had said, "Oh, you're obviously an atheist," or something stupid like that. But I gave them an impression without even trying, and that's the goal, right? Is to apply that labor so that um, you are becoming a model of perfection. Robert, how about you? What is your definition of Masonic labor?
Well, I'm gonna try this out. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All right. Well, it's raining like crazy outside, so
Sounds
bear
good.
with me. Um, Masonic labor to me is essentially the application of the ritual teachings. So once we become an entered apprentice, get our fellow craft, get our master mace, and it goes beyond just the exploration of the working tools that we're given, right? If we're looking at masonry as a whole, we have cross jurisdictionally worldwide, there are many, many, many working tools. And if we want to look at the way masonry is today in 2018, is it wrong to think about other working tools? And I think we talked about this in an episode in the past where we talked about, um, see if I can bump up my gain a little bit. Anyway, we talked about in the past, like what could working tools for 2018 be? Um, and what could the lessons be with those? Whether that's the 32-ounce water bottle or the smartwatch that counts your steps or whatever they're going to be. But the idea is that we're constantly trying to better ourselves, because by bettering ourselves we're affecting the world, right? And just like John got that great compliment about being a good Christian man, I mean, that's like a solid statement. And what a compliment, right? I mean, if we would all be so lucky as to have somebody tell us, like, hey, I think you're just a stand-up guy, right? Like, many times those are compliments that happen behind our back. In Freemasonry, we like to say that we will vindicate somebody's character before his face and behind his back. And I think it's interesting, like, if you know somebody who is a good solid dude, don't wait until they're dead to say that. Tell them, it'll add fuel to the fire. It'll allow them to be um, to add to their I guess moral repertoire, right? I mean, unless it's me and you tell me that, my head's just going to get this big. um, but it's just important that we're doing the work. So for me, the work that I do is essentially studying different philosophies, not just Masonic, right? Masonry puts you on a path. And I think once I'm on that path, now I have a better understanding of how to apply. It's almost like allegory 101. And now I understand it better. And the more I branch out and the more research I do, whether that's in comparative religions, comparative philosophies, or I mean, whatever whatever thought process you want to take, the idea is that you're building your mind to house something bigger than what you had before. You, John, you mentioned a little bit better than yesterday, right? Like in lean, what do we say in lean? It's 1% better every year, or whatever the mantra is. I can't remember, but it's a small increment over time, and it doesn't matter what you were. A friend of mine, RJ Butler, talked about becoming an entered apprentice, a fellow craft, and a master mason. Moving up to the degree of master mason doesn't mean that you're a master mason. It just means that you're not a fellow craft anymore. You've moved a little bit beyond that, or you're not an EA anymore. You've moved a little bit beyond that. And he's a martial arts expert, right? So he talks about that in terms of belts. You know, he gets his yellow belt. It just means you're not that last belt anymore. Kind of like when you complete a birthday, you're not, you've now completed that, 21st year. You are now starting your 22nd year. So you're not really 21. That kind of idea of leaving that former self behind, and getting better a little bit every day in terms of your philosophical understandings. So meditation is probably one of the biggest things that I do, and um, really trying to hold meaningful discourse with people that are around me every day. Uh, that's my Masonic labor, I guess.
That's awesome. Actually, you sparked some curiosity in me when you talked about the birthday milestones, right? And so um, progress towards those milestones is really interesting. I was reading a good book. I think it was called The Power of When by Dan Pink. It just came out this year, and he says that, for example, one of the things that he did was look at um, the marathon runners of like some of these big popular marathons, and what he did was he got all the ages of all of the runners of the marathon, and over half, I think it was even closer to like 60-80%, don't quote me on that, um, but more than half of the people in the marathon were of the age where their age ended in 9. So they were either 19, 29, 39, 49, 59 years old. And it's fascinating because when they interviewed them, they said, well, why did you run the marathon? Oh, it's just something I wanted to do before I was insert the next birth year. Before would turn 50, I wanted to run the marathon. And it's really says something interesting about the human condition, about how we're trying to aspire for something, and we give ourselves these challenges, like Robert said, to get us just one step further into the ultimate goal, right, of where we are going to end up.
I wanted to touch up on that Kante. What is it? Kante? Did I say it right?
Kaizen.
Kaizen, which is that philosophy of incremental progress, and it's little increment. It's it's one of the ways in which change can be sustainable. When you go cold turkey and stop drinking beer, or when you not never stop, or you're trying to uh, not eat X kind of food or something like that, and people sometimes think that, okay, no, I just have to go cold turkey. I have to jump fully in, and that works for a limited amount of time, and then your body almost kind of like starts really craving, because the transition wasn't progressive. It was just abrupt. And something that's very sustainable in exercise and in nutrition is to make little adjustments over time. One of the when losing weight, it's recommended that you lose maybe 1-2 pounds per week, not to go into these crash diets that you lose 10 pounds in a week, because the likelihood of you just bouncing right back and gaining it all with interest, it's very high. But that's if you think about chipping at the stone, it is that kind of motion. You're not chipping off like huge portions of the stone. You are very controlled in your motion, very controlled in your attack of the imperfections. Otherwise, you destroy the, you could destroy the plan or sabotage the actual reshaping of that stone.
Your allegory, Juan, is perfect because I think about shaping a stone and deliberate action, right? But like, if we're going to apply that, we're necessarily thinking like maybe we're forgetting the fact that we have to have some sort of examination of the stone, some sort of internal examination, and we have to be honest with what we're seeing
Hmm.
externally, internally, and we have to be comfortable with seeing it and then chipping it right there and
Yeah.
saying, I don't like that. I have a beer every day after work. I feel like for me, that's not acceptable. And I'm going to stop doing that. Or I got to stop eating right before I go to bed, or making excuses of why it's okay to cheat when I know I shouldn't be eating this, but I'm gonna, and then, oh, I'll make it up tomorrow or whatever. It's what is the mantra, for any self-help group, is the first step is admitting you have the problem.
Yeah.
And so that by the very act, right, that is looking at the stone, right, and finding those imperfect surfaces and chiseling it away. That famous statue that everybody sells. I mean, almost every Masonic shop, you see it everywhere, right? It's the guy who's like carving himself out of stone,
Yeah.
and it's that, right? But a symbol is 1,000 words. So
Love
And
it.
well said, Juan.
thank you. I was gonna mention that I was talking with my oldest son today. We were talking about a project that he has, and he has to. We've been working on whenever he gets his assignment that he needs to look ahead at what the deadline is, how many days are available for it, how many tasks are required to finish, from start to finish, and how can he effectively pace himself to finish before the deadline. And one of the resistance that I was getting from him was that writing the essay component of it was just one piece. And I was telling him, no, you need to actually write a rough draft because you don't want to just attack the final, board with what you think is the right thing to write. You need to actually have a plan before you go and attack it. And I was trying to convey to him, because he was surrounded by some of my paintings. I was telling him, do you think that I just go, in front of a blank canvas and just start mixing colors and throwing stuff around? Like, I have my notebook in which I have my sketches. And after I have those sketches, when it's time for me to sit down and create the piece, I make decisions about composition and I figure, I try to follow, the golden rule if I can. And I try, not the golden rule, but the golden ratio. I try to control the eye as it moves through the painting. It's not just some random painting. And I said, some of my worst paintings are the ones in which I am desperate and I try to do it all at once and just go for it. The ones that I'm the proudest of are the ones in which I take my time and I meticulously take little steps and little increments until at the end I can sign it and be proud of it.
That leads us to some of the comments that we've had on Facebook and on the YouTube chat. The question I threw out to the YouTube chat was, okay, now it's your turn. How would you define Masonic labor? And I'll start with someone who posted in the chat as well as on Facebook, Brother Jacob Bernard, who is celebrating his birthday today and his first day teaching. So kudos all around, Brother Jacob. But he says, perhaps I'm biased, but Masonic labor to me is benefiting someone else. Yes, I will typically learn in the process, but what have I done for someone else? Was it a lecture or a ritual done well? Was it perhaps inspiring someone to pursue their own Masonic goals, etc.? Any of those things will advance myself, but more importantly, advance someone else in their own journey. It reminds me a lot of the Albert Pike quote that says, what we have done for ourselves dies with us, what we have done for others lives on forever, or is immortal. So that's a good modern interpretation of that, Brother Jacob. Some of the other quotes out of the YouTube chat say that defining Masonic labor to them means building the immortal soul in an evolving fashion, or that what we're taught to do in the lecture of the 24-inch gauge, how to sacrifice and become the cornerstone of the building for all mankind. All good interpretations. Very, very deep. Let's see, reflection on the oneself to become better and to be a man that inspires others to be better. So really good quotes, really good thoughts from everyone in the YouTube chat. So keep that up. All right. Anything else you wanted to do before we started closing this up for shameless thoughts and final plugs? No, the other way around. So I always do that half jokingly. But let's go over to, let's see, Juan to start talking about his shameless plugs and final thoughts.
Yeah, I can't talk about my shameless thoughts.
Yes, I have to go to my priest for that one.
They're all shameful. No, I really enjoy having these conversations, and I kind of missed having one of these with you brothers, and I'm glad that we decided on doing that tonight. It's one of those things that kind of, you know, brings me back to, realizing how much I love our, how much I love our fraternity and how much I love the teachings that come with it. And this is a conversation that is not difficult to have with other brothers in real life. So, one thing that I would like to encourage the brothers listening or watching is take a moment, schedule a night to go and sit, in the porch with a brother or two and just have this kind of conversation. It's like, how does Masonry help me become better? How did it help you? How could I do something better? And like, kind of like go back to those basics and go back to the basics of finding the practical application of Masonry into our lives. Um, there's when you think about, and I know we've talked about this, some of the best conversations I've had with people are over a beer or over a whiskey or something like that. And we need that kind of thing. It cannot all be work, which is very appropriate for our labor discussion. It cannot all be, you know, just going forward, forward, forward. There has to be a moment in which you pause, you step back, and you know enjoy some of the time. Um, Part of like Robert was talking, part of his labor is to take into consideration some practices that are going to make him a better thinker, a more a person more in control of his emotions, like meditation. Meditation is a practice that doesn't need to have um, religious ties or religious connotations. There is a practical side of meditation that can help you recognize the thoughts that are appearing in your life. So when you're facing a difficult situation, you're not just in reactive mode, but you can have a even keeled response, a measured response that can be more effective in tackling your problems. So for me, that has been a practice that has helped me tremendously, especially having uh, kids in grade school. I need all the patience I can get, and a regular meditation practice actually it helps me be in control of my emotions and my thoughts and my actions. So I love this conversation. Thank you for everybody who makes the Masonic Roundtable such a special thing. Uh, if you know of new brothers that have joined the fraternity, take a moment and let them know about the Masonic Roundtable. Let them know if you found something of value here. Uh, be generous and share that with the other brothers. Let them know. So to sign off, my shameless plug, I invite you brothers to go to freemasonryart.com, where I have some new sketches, new drawings, new paintings are coming out soon. And I have some really cool things in the Masonic Mystery Box coming in the next month. So I'm excited to show those to all of you. Thank you, brothers.
Nice. All right, Robert. Final thoughts.
Well, sure. So my first final thought is my daughter might decide to be super loud outside and give her final thoughts. But anyway, um, so Jacob, I think you were the one who, yeah, the teacher, right? You had your first full day of teaching, and the idea that giving to other people is thus labor, in this kind of true sense of the word. And what I love about that is the idea that I constantly struggle with, which is that if I ever do anything, and I feel like I get anything out of it, I feel that that is essentially, in some manner or form, selfish, right? I feel like unless we are 100% giving of everything we have, life, property, and limb, that is the only selfless act there is. And to be completely selfless would be the most, the would attain like the highest level of our perception of whatever holy or divine thing there is. So if that means godlike, then sure, attribute it to godlike, right? The endless gift of life and creation and all of these things. And so I loved that you said giving. It's a really great way to think about that. Uh, as far as these conversations go, always my favorite stuff. And like Juan said, there's no reason you can't just, drop this card at the dinner table, at lodge or after lodge or whatever. People will gravitate toward this. You will get the 50-year member, you'll get the 20-year member, you'll get the brand new guy, and you'll all be sitting around a table learning from each other, just like, I learned about John's and Juan's, their experiences and their perceptions of these things. Um, and that's another practice, right, of doing the labor, right? Like I'm learning, I'm perceiving through them, and that helps, expand my understanding of things. So do that. Try to live a day in your brother's shoes or whoever's shoes, and see what they go through and understand how they are, and that's part of the labor. Um, that's it. So thanks for being with us tonight. It was a great episode. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and share the show with your friends. And that's it. If you like Masonic podcasts, Sunday nights 9:30, Whence Came You is my show. And this Sunday, I got to speak with Dago Rodriguez of the Southern California Research Magazine, Fraternal Review, and we went through uh, the entire magazine and talked about all top 10 esoteric authors as voted by the scholars and the readers of the magazine. So, um, really cool. If you're not a subscriber of that magazine, you'll learn how to subscribe, but also you'll get to know the results, even though you don't have it. So check it out this Sunday. We're gonna have that out, and it should be really fun. Thanks.
Awesome. Very cool. Let's see. So for me, really basically, uh, my definition of Masonic labor in one word is optimization. Again, I come from a very, again, lean, agile background, but really the goal is not just optimizing the work, but also optimizing the play, right? Optimizing, um, getting to those other virtues, right? So that means not just optimizing how quickly or efficiently we get something done, but how are we getting the maximum value out of it? So if that's, prayer, how are you getting the most out of prayer? It doesn't mean speed, it means how are you getting the most out of it. um, and so another thing to think about too is like, people say, if I run into a friend in the hallway I haven't seen in a long time, hey, we really should get together sometime. Sure, if you don't schedule it, it doesn't happen, right? So if you really have to make a concentrated effort, be more mindful, about what your goal in life is, and that'll help you get towards what your labor is. Making sure that you're kind of, to use cliches, keeping your eyes on the prize and doing everything you can to get to that. If you want to learn more about how can you optimize your lodge experience, go check out It's Business Time, Adapting a Corporate Path to Freemasonry. We actually slipped in some of the conversation tonight, some of the things that were covered in this book. So if you want to learn more, go check that out. It's on Amazon, Kindle, Audible. It's everywhere. It's a good thing. And we've had really good feedback from it too. So thank you for all those who bought it and left us some positive reviews on Amazon. Really helps. It really helps us with ranking. It really helps us just making sure that we're providing value back to you, right? We're optimizing value given to you. So thank you very much for that. Really enjoyed the topic. I love having these conversations, and we've had a lot of good feedback from, of course, all the brothers in the chat and as well. So let's do this again. How about next week? How about Tuesday, 10/9 Central? See you then. Thanks very much for watching, and keep searching for more light. Have a good night.